September 28, 1987. A lady entered a public medical center in Goiânia, Brazil, holding a container. In frustration, she hurled the container onto the doctor's desk. The doctor inquired, "What is this discourtesy?" The woman answered, "There is something in this container that is eliminating my entire household. Please examine it yourself." The doctor reflected that yet another mad lady had come, but he was unaware that what lay inside that container was not merely going to eliminate that lady's household, but was about to unlock the gates of hell for the whole municipality. And that gateway to hell was currently resting on his desk. Before continuing, let me mention that this tale has no link to the cobalt-60 radiation that dispersed in Delhi, but it is genuine that the Delhi occurrence is like an insect compared to this incident. This happening will drain you inwardly, and following hearing it, you will stay in disbelief for a fortnight, because today we're going to discuss one of Earth's most perilous and never-forgotten catastrophes, the Goiânia catastrophe. In 1985, a commercial radiotherapeutic facility in Goiânia needed to transfer to a contemporary building, and the previous building was to be leveled. However, due to a court battle at the terminal moment, the clinic could not be leveled, resulting in some clinical instruments left there for many years. Days went by, and the ancient building's circumstance deteriorated. One afternoon, certain robbers took notice of this building. On September 10, 1987, a pair of robbers named Wagner Pereira and Roberto Alves penetrated the ancient building. There they found a substantial mechanism that seemed like extraordinarily high-value clinical apparatus, yet they lacked knowledge of what it really was. They both resolved to pilfer the device. Yet the device was so massive and hefty that they could not transport it in a sole load. Therefore, the pair of robbers extracted the most prized-seeming segment from the equipment and brought it to Alves's residence. They formulated a strategy to disassemble this pilfered segment and vend it on the junk marketplace. But preceding they might execute something, they turned severely unwell. Observing manifestations of high body temperature and bowel discharge, they presumed perhaps they had consumed something detrimental. But they probably did not grasp what was about to transpire to them. The criminal Wagner Pereira's circumstance worsened, and an unusual indication surfaced on his palm that resembled a wound. When he proceeded to exhibit it to a medical professional, the medical professional communicated it was perhaps a substance response and recommended relaxation. Simultaneously, the alternate criminal, Alves, was laboriously attempting to disassemble the mechanism. Separating that mechanical segment was no uncomplicated endeavor. Following 3 periods of strenuous exertion, Alves succeeded in separating the segment. As he had presumed, he discovered very prized junk material from the apparatus. His concentration was chiefly attracted to an aluminum receptacle that was positioned precisely in the core of the mechanism. This receptacle possessed a transparent pane. Alves shattered the pane with a tool, and interior were grain-comparable granules that, upon contact, transformed into fine substance and dispersed into the surroundings. He lacked comprehension of what that substance was, but subsequently, this equivalent substance was going to cause 70% of the structures in Goiânia to be obliterated like playing cards. As I communicated, Alves extracted the receptacle. It maintained grain-resembling particles. The moment he made contact with them, they turned into fine substance and scattered into the surroundings. Alves lacked comprehension of what this substance was. Subsequently, Alves transported it to a junk storage location where he disposed of the mechanism segments to a junk merchant named De Ferreira. Ferreira kept it in his storage structure. Nevertheless, at night, during his inspection of the storage location, he observed that the junk he had obtained in the early hours was shimmering, emanating a cyan luminescence that seemed to summon him. Captivated, he approached nearer and witnessed the cyan luminescence emanating from a receptacle inside the aluminum receptacle. Ferreira was proficient in junk substances, yet he had never witnessed such a shimmering substance in his complete lifespan. He deliberated it must unquestionably be crushed substance from a valued gemstone. For the subsequent trio of periods, he displayed this incredible phenomenon to his loved ones and connections. He even commenced distributing this substance among his loved ones. A single of these connections, a male named Ivo Ferreira, took this substance to his residence. He considered his offspring would appreciate it. As Ivo contemplated, his offspring was enthralled by that mysterious substance. The offspring commenced engaging with it and put it to her appendages and visage, making her complete countenance gleam like an evening radiance. However, the offspring's amusement terminated rapidly. Momentarily following putting the substance, the diminutive offspring commenced ejecting profusely, and surprisingly her ejection likewise discharged a cyan luminescence. Meanwhile, the junk merchant De Ferreira's spouse additionally commenced turning seriously unwell. Ejection and bowel discharge had her in a terrible circumstance. She proceeded to the neighboring healing establishment. However, the healing specialist additionally dispatched her back, declaring it was perhaps a substance response and she would mend with respite. That equivalent nighttime, the junk storage proprietor Ferreira additionally turned substantially unwell. Yet he persisted proceeding to his occupation and instructed his personnel to partition the substance he had bought from the robbers. He maintained advantageous materials and forwarded the leftover to a different junk merchant. In this manner, the equipment and its substance commenced dispersing all through Goiânia municipality. A handful of segments had additionally traveled beyond the municipality. All individuals believed they were turning unwell due to contaminated consumables. However, De Ferreira's spouse, Maria Ferreira, conceived a reflection. Given that they presented this substance and junk to their connections, all of them had been turning unwell. Perhaps this refuse was the foundation of all the health conditions. Maria was not extensively educated, yet when the healing specialist neglected her circumstance as a basic substance response, she did not stay quiet. Since she felt profoundly that given that this substance penetrated their residence, she and her connections had been turning unwell. Incapable of staying quiet, Maria commanded her laborer, Gerardo Silva, to lift the container having the segments and substance. Subsequently, boarding a populous metropolitan transport, she proceeded to the territorial healing establishment in Goiânia. Upon landing, she hurled the container on the healing specialist's desk and exclaimed, "I do not possess any substance response. This is the element that is eliminating my complete household and connections." The healing specialist was bewildered. He requested Maria a handful of inquiries, the quantity of individuals it had sickened, where this junk originated, and so on. Following a duration, the healing specialist hypothesized it might be a type of equatorial sickness like mosquito-spread fever. Consequently, he transferred Maria to the neighboring equatorial sickness establishment. Following Maria Ferreira's departure, the healing specialist initiated perceiving odd sensations. He felt apprehensive and commenced hacking. He obtained the junk and positioned it on a fractured seat outdoors the healing establishment. He did not desire to hazard anything. Because of this apprehension, he obtained the apparatus and disclosed the circumstance directly to higher powers. Meanwhile, Maria and her laborer traversed to the equatorial sickness establishment. There, they discovered that not exclusively their household, but multitudes of additional individuals were coming with equivalent manifestations. Shockingly, the equivalent transport they had ridden was stationed outdoors the establishment, and each of its travelers were ejecting as they penetrated the establishment. Commotion was all over. It appeared like a genuine zombie outbreak had burst forth in Goiânia municipality. At the equatorial sickness establishment, no healing specialist could comprehend what was transpiring to individuals. However, a youthful healing specialist conceived a notion. He detected that patients' integument seemed combusted, multitudes had inflammation, and their integument pigmentation was shifting. He possessed a feeling regarding what could be occurring, yet if he exchanged this notion with his superiors, he could be mocked. On September 28, 1987, a healing specialist named Dr. Monti obtained a telecommunication. In fact, that day, Dr. Monti obtained a pair of strange telecommunications. The principal was from Goiânia Healthcare Authority, stating a female had deposited a handful of junk on her desk and is declaring it is murdering all. The secondary was from the Metropolitan Equatorial Sickness Establishment from that youthful healing specialist, declaring he suspects his patients might be sustaining radiation injury. Dr. Monti could have overlooked an individual telecommunication. Yet acquiring a pair of such extraordinary telecommunications from the matching vicinity inside minutes of every other was decidedly substantial. The second Dr. Monti concluded the telecommunications. He observed downward from his quaternary floor portal and detected multitudes of individuals howling, abandoning their transportation and sprinting. A handful bore belongings on their shoulders. A handful embraced offspring to their chests. Observing this, Dr. Monti was disturbed. Via trembling appendages, he solicited the Goiânia Regional Ecological Authority and petitioned they transmit a medical physicist to examine the junk substance in the container to conclude what was happening in Goiânia. The Ecological Authority delegated a medical physicist called Walter Ferreira to examine and transmitted him to the healing establishment where the peculiar substance junk container was positioned. Dr. Ferreira readied his mechanisms and obtained a taxi. Throughout the voyage, he chose to examine his radiation apparatus. The instant he initiated it, alarms commenced sounding, and the apparatus's needle went beyond its scale. Dr. Ferreira imagined the mechanism might be impaired. He reversed the taxi to the headquarters and obtained a contemporary radiation apparatus. This occurrence, he initiated the mechanism instantly subsequent to exiting the headquarters, and the matching phenomenon transpired. The apparatus was maxed out. There could solely be a sole implication. The complication was not the apparatus, rather an immense vigor origin somewhere adjacent, perpetually releasing harmful radiation. An unidentified influence was near him, and observing this, Dr. Ferreira was horrified. For a second, he deliberated about abandoning the municipality, yet he collected his bravery and carried on the assignment he had been entrusted. Upon touching down at the healing establishment, what Dr. Ferreira perceived constructed him lightheaded. He witnessed innumerable firefighter carriages and aid vehicles stationed there. The scenario was that the healing specialist who had gotten the container from Maria Ferreira was so tense regarding it that he had summoned emergency authorities and mandated the container be destroyed instantaneously. Amazingly, the firefighter personnel was on the verge of jettison the container in a neighboring body of flowing water. Yet providentially, Dr. Ferreira touched down and halted them from executing something. He commanded the immediate evacuation of the complete healing establishment, or else all the invalids there would terminate as lifeless forms. Pursuing this, Walter Ferreira currently had to ascertain what this radioactive fountain was and from where it arrived. Pursuing considerable examination, Dr. Ferreira monitored the fountain backward to Maria Ferreira's spouse's junk storage location, and subsequently connected it to the deserted radiotherapeutic facility. Upon landing at that ancient structure, he discovered that throughout the transfer to the contemporary structure a pair of eras prior, the facility workers had overlooked a radiotherapeutic equipment there, and that equivalent equipment was the source of this horrifying catastrophe. That equipment held an aluminum receptacle containing 93 grams of profoundly radioactive cesium fluid. Cesium substance produced from the radioactive isotope cesium-137. This was a profoundly hazardous bulletin for Dr. Ferreira. In modern times, cesium is not employed in radiotherapeutic processes because it is very harmful. If its fountain is mishandled or fractured, the outcomes can be devastating, as cesium fluid breaks down readily in flowing water and surroundings. In alternate phrasing, cesium can generate a thermonuclear destruction. Individuals pass away anguishing like zombies, with no likelihood of permanence. Dr. Ferreira notified higher powers of his conclusions, and hearing this, the Brazilian leadership was stunned. In moments, a thermonuclear catastrophe was proclaimed in Goiânia municipality. Millions of individuals were filled into transporters resembling livestock and transported away from the municipality. The complete municipality started to deplete. Quietness descended all over. Primarily, the obligation of discarding the radiotherapeutic equipment segments was delivered to knowledgeable individuals. The paramount objective was that container. Extracting it from that seat was profoundly hazardous. Therefore, a machinery was utilized to elevate a waste pipe, which was subsequently positioned over the container on the seat, and the whole gathering was encased in concrete. Disturbance dominated all through Goiânia. Knowledgeable individuals and specialists flocked from all directions of Brazil and were tasked, resembling stray creatures, with discovering fountains of radiation. Carriages outfitted with particular radiation apparatus were maneuvered via the pathways of Goiânia to discover contaminated fountains. Aerial vessels were additionally engaged for this objective. An Olympic recreation ground in Goiânia was transformed into a filtering headquarters to identify individuals who had come into association with radiation, and a research center was erected for examining flowing water. Pursuing hunt and inspection, waste from tainted residences and structures was loaded into transporters and transmitted away from the municipality. A complete of 3,500 tonnage of cesium-tainted refuse was eliminated from the municipality and transported 15 kilometers away, where it was interred in the terrain. At the recreation ground, 100,000 individuals arrived and exited, resembling zombies. And the recreation ground persisted to pack. 100,000 individuals were examined, of which 1,000 were identified to be tainted. Amid those, 249 individuals were identified to possess considerable radiation publicity. In the bulk of occurrences, it was on the outer layer, yet in a handful it was discovered privately in the liquid. Of these 249 individuals, 20 were so profoundly radioactive that even their refuse and liquid needed to be discarded as thermonuclear refuse. Providentially, the preponderance of individuals recovered partially within a few periods, yet they would encounter hardships from the radiation permanently. Yet not all were as fortunate. Of the pair of criminals, Wagner Pereira needed to undergo amputation of a pair of appendages. Robert Alves, who had partitioned the mechanism, sacrificed his complete appendage. Geraldo Silva, Maria's laborer, who had fetched the container to the healing establishment, experienced acute radiation combustions on his rear, a standard manifestation amid those who possessed immediate association with the cesium. A quartet of individuals misplaced their existences inside that matching period. Hearing their fatalities will solidify your vital fluid. The most horrible fatality was that of the 6-period-old offspring, Laide Ferreira, Ivo's offspring. Not exclusively had she positioned cesium-137 to her visage, yet she had additionally swallowed a handful of the shimmering substance while devouring a food item. She terminated a quite anguishing decease on October 23, 1987, shuddering in agony. On the matching period, her parental aunt Maria Ferreira, who had transported the container to the healing establishment and had correlated the junk to individuals' sicknesses, additionally terminated an anguishing demise at the lifetime of 37 from considerable radiation injury, languishing from interior liquid seepage. The residual a pair who misplaced their existences were both laborers at Devar Herrera's junk storage location, who had dedicated substantial duration with the radioactive isotope. It is stated that their sensory organs had transformed ashen, resembling phantom entities. On account of this thermonuclear happening, the populace of Goiânia encountered immense hardships that can never be overlooked. Observe, a period prior to this happening, in 1986, the Chernobyl devastation had occurred. Thus, populace's dread of thermonuclear happenings was previously quite increased. On account of this dread, the populace of Goiânia encountered grave discriminatory handling. Outsiders were frightened even to converse with populace from Goiânia, allow solo encounter them. Airplane captains denied them transits, transport operators would not authorize them boarding, and outsiders would not lease them residences. This was unfortunate sufficiently, yet enterprises in alternate municipalities repudiated to buy products from Goiânia's traders, which bankrupted enterprises both sizable and diminutive in Goiânia, abandoning traders on the thoroughfare. The discriminatory handling achieved such a pinnacle that on the period the 6-period-old offspring was to be interred, approximately 2,000 individuals rioted to obstruct it. Not a sole individual desired to inter that offspring in their burial ground. Yet, via the backing of millions of safety officers, the offspring was interred there. A unique fiberglass burial vessel, decorated with lead on the inside, was constructed for her. It is stated that given that that offspring was interred in that burial ground, not a sole individual has interred any of their cherished individuals there. She was the terminal offspring interred in that burial ground. It was abandoned succeeding that. The Goiânia happening is deemed a soul of the direst nuclear thermal catastrophes in past times. Yet the regrettable element is that it could have been conveniently circumvented. Examination displayed that the facility proprietor had endeavored to eliminate the equipment, yet because of an enduring judicial disagreement among the property proprietor and his enterprise, he was not permitted to transport it away. Even currently, that cesium-137 refuse, encased in concrete, rests on that fractured seat. The healing specialist, who at first overlooked it as simple refuse, had no grasp that subsequently that matching refuse was going to result in the obliteration of 70% of Goiânia's structures. And that is where our chronicle concludes.